Hi, and welcome to another episode of Lessons I Learned in Law, the podcast, with me, Scott Brown, founder of Heriot Brown in-house legal recruitment. Since 2020, I've been interviewing the leading voices in the legal profession to hear their story on how they've made it to the top of their game. Each guest neatly boils down their wisdom into their top 3 lessons that they've learned in their careers to share with us. In Season 6, we've gone a bit international, and I'll be speaking with chief legal officers and general counsels, as well as others from across the legal industry. They'll be sharing their insights into what's happening in their legal functions and how they're navigating the biggest challenges that they're facing in the profession. As always, I'll be trying to have open and honest conversations as I look to get under the skin on how they've built their careers and they continue to build best-in-class legal teams. I'll be bringing you these conversations every Thursday, streaming on LinkedIn live at 12 p.m. GMT, and it'll be available across multiple platforms, so stay tuned. I'm delighted to be joined today on Lessons I Learned in Law by Maria Barros, who is Chief Legal and Public Affairs Officer at Booking.com. She's also a member of their management board, and she sits on the board of the Association for Corporate Counsel, which is a body of a network and a community of in-house legal professionals, and it's something that she's really passionate about. She's actually chairing the annual conference in Edinburgh, my hometown, in a month or so's time. So in the podcast, you'll learn about how Maria joined Booking.com in 2019, pre-COVID, and has seen it through a significant time of growth, and how she's structured and her thought process around structuring and building a really integrated legal function, which to me sounds like something that's really best in class. You'll also hear about her background. She's a real international lawyer, a citizen of the world, so to speak. She qualified in Brazil, practiced in New York, has cross-qualified in England and Wales, and that's brought her here to Europe, where she is in her current role, but prior to that was at AB InBev. So if you've got itchy feet, fancy international travel, or if you're intrigued about how to build a really successful legal function, or hear a bit more about personal brand and how to engage with talent in the way that she has, and building the legal team at Booking.com, then this one's for you. So tune in and hope you enjoy. So hi Maria, welcome to Lessons I Learned in Law.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Scott.
Thanks for coming in. We're here in sunny Amsterdam, recording in a new studio. So thank you for joining us. To introduce, I've given the introduction, but so CLO and Senior Vice President at Booking.com. Could you start by giving us an overview of your position, a bird's eye view of your role at Booking.com?
Sure. So I've been at Booking for almost 5 years now. On May 8th, I'm turning 5 years at nice. Booking. And I'm Chief Legal and Public Affairs. So that means that I cover, with my team, obviously, legal, compliance, and public affairs. And I'm also part of as what they call here, the management board of the company, reporting to the CEO. And Booking is quite a unique company in the sense that it's part of Booking Holdings, but Booking is the majority of that business. We don't disclose that number, okay. But Booking Holdings is listed in NASDAQ. Okay. So we have to comply with all the U.S. securities laws. But the history of the company is born Dutch. It's one of the oldest internet companies. It's over 25 years old. Nice. Dutch founders, and it grew massively. Some people say it's been one of the most successful M&As in history because it was bought by a couple of 100 million, and now market cap is 100 billion. So it's a success story of an European tech company. Yeah,
I was doing my homework leading up to this. So it survived the .com
barely,
bubble burst.
But yes.
Limping out the other side.
Yes, limping. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And then what's interesting is that it's a global scope. My team has been growing since when I joined. We were about 40 people, and now we are getting by the year end around 170, 180 people. So, and one question I usually get is, why is that? And a big part, I would say, is the ambitions of the company have changed. We are expanding into flights, insurance, and a number of other areas, attractions, and that comes with the need of different skills.
Yeah.
So it's been a very interesting journey to see the department grow.
Nice. And wider, the sort of regulatory scope and the public affairs piece that goes with those new
no, absolutely,
areas.
because tech is becoming more regulated. And I usually like to say that I really believe in legal and public affairs being together, because the way I see it, legal is the law of today and public affairs is the law of tomorrow. So it makes sense for them to be together in the same department and looking at policy issues, and I really enjoy that.
Yeah, excellent. And from those early days, are there people still involved in Booking.com from longest tenure? And,
we call anybody that has been at Booking for more than 10 years, we call them dinosaurs.
Okay.
But we have plenty of dinosaurs. Nice. So it's great. It's a mix, and I think I've heard here in Amsterdam we have a campus of 5,000 people, and I heard at some point that there's more than 100 nationalities. I haven't checked, but my own team, we have more than 30 nationalities.
Wow.
And that's something that I feel very strongly, to have that diversity culturally, and also lawyers qualified in many different places. So we have here lawyers from all around Europe and elsewhere. And I'm very proud of that, because that really helps us cover that scope.
Yeah, yeah. It's it strikes me just about Amsterdam as a city, the multicultural element of it. But with those, is that consciously hiring people from international, hiring them in to move and relocate? Yeah,
no, lots of people moved to here, and then people that were here already. But one of our challenges, and which makes the job interesting, is that our product, except for certain countries around the world, is available everywhere. And we have partners everywhere around the world, so in 200 countries.
Yeah.
So this means that many times we are looking at regulation of various places, and we need people qualified, or it's helpful to have people qualified in our key markets. So US, Spain, Italy, UK, the Netherlands, France, it's all very important. And then Asia, of course, as well. Yeah.
And joined, I don't want to hark back, and COVID's an overdone story, but joined 2019, middle of 2019, middle of 2020. How did the role that you were hired to do, what was the biggest shift between that May and then March, I guess, 2020, when travel
February,
industry?
It started in February, I remember. But yes, it was, look, it changed, of course, because we were in a trajectory of growth, and then all of a sudden 85% of the revenue was gone. So it was quite an experience, and I think had many learnings that I could talk about, but I would say yes, we got into all sorts of as many companies, unfortunately, we had to go through restructuring. So that was a very big piece of work that we haven't expected. But then the part that made me very proud was how we dealt with the travelers, because one interesting fact that not a lot of people know, but a lot of people in Europe in January, during winter, they book their summer holidays. So when the COVID hit, we had a lot of issues with, everybody had booked already, but a big percentage had booked our summer holidays and were nervous about what that meant and wanted refunds. And I think we played a very important role there of helping travelers with that and giving refunds, in most cases. So it was quite
I can imagine the phone lines would have been, off the charts.
No, it was 400,000 calls a day. A day. So you can imagine customer service and the challenges. But yes, but I'm proud, and it also taught me. We went straight to the regulators here in the Netherlands, for example, to explain what we were doing, and also and we can talk about that later. But the importance of being proactive and collaborative and transparent usually pays off.
And you moved from the booze industry, AB and Bev, which probably had a massive peak going into lockdown if my consumption was anything to go by. So yeah, it must have been.
I think they struggled as well. Yes, but I was in the beer industry. I like to say I was. Yeah, it's both things are things that are connected with people's entertainment, fun times, and social.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's not such a big change. But for me, what was important was that the beer industry was already very regulated, and the tech industry is becoming more regulated. So that was also part of the driver. I wanted to move to a place where new law was being created, where new issues were coming up.
Yeah.
And definitely Booking has delivered on that promise.
Yeah, excellent. And you're also, we were talking before hitting record, you're a board member of the ACC, the Associate Corporate Councils.
Yeah, so the Association of Corporate Counsel is one of the largest associations. I think it's the largest association in the world for in-house lawyers, and I'm a board of what we call the European chapter, and I've been there for 5 years. And it gives me a lot of happiness by doing that, because I really believe in the role of in-house lawyers as a force for good within companies. But it is a tough job. Nobody writes us to say how everything is going well, right? There's a lot of, you're dealing with issues and challenges every day. So it's a way of meeting people that have similar experiences and also very international. It's a very international organization. So we are organizing now a conference in end of May in Scotland, in Edinburgh, in your hometown. Very, very excited about that, and we want to make it more interactive and facilitating more connections between people. So I'm very excited. I'm the chair. Yeah. It's a lot of work to pull together the program. So I really hope that we get we have a fantastic conference. I'm sure we will have.
And what's the focus of the agenda and of the conference? You said connecting more people. How are you going to facilitate that?
We are calling it legal and beyond. So beyond the role of quote unquote just legal, and then having two different tracks of emerging leaders and leaders to also help you with the different moments in your career. But the ACC has this slogan, in-house by in-house.
Right.
So it's really a lot of general counsels, deputy general counsels, sharing experience and talking about things like AI or things like tricky career moments. There's a little bit that sometimes is a group therapy as well, but it normalizes a lot of the things. So it's really focused on the in-house and customized for the challenges that in-house lawyers have, which is different from the materials that you get from law firms. So we want to differentiate in that sense.
Yeah, brilliant. And I look forward to hearing more about it and perhaps getting involved. Where we've sponsored events in the past and gone to conferences, like the big takeaway for people is from feedback that we see is the connections that they make at the event and those common interests or common themes and problems that people face. That feel good factor after a conference is often driven by that. Like I've got 6 new connections that I've met with. I can keep in touch with them and share war stories or successes. Because I think that the agenda is there for a reason, but you probably quite quickly you remember it was a great presentation, but actually the crux of it, you probably have one.
Yeah, no, exactly, and that's why we are doing more like things like round table that someone presents for 20 minutes and then you are on your table and you discuss with each other and then goes back to the panel. But we are not having, except for the keynote speakers, we are not having any panels. Everything is going to be round table or fish bowls, because we also want to facilitate that, because some people. At least I find it hard in the coffee break to go to someone that I haven't met before. I am shy in that way, and I think it's different when you are in a table with a topic to discuss, and that helps breaking the ice and forming more connections. So we want to make it the uncomfortable more comfortable.
And it increases the probability of speaking to someone and being heard by someone who's the most relevant to you. There's one to many in a group setting like that versus there's somebody that's also stood on their own at the coffee machine. I'm going to go and speak to them.
And lawyers are also sometimes concerned about saying things in public, right? In a smaller group, we are very conscious about that, right? So
absolutely. Great. Well, look forward to hearing how it goes. So we'll jump in now to lesson one. What's your first lesson?
So I've been thinking about how to approach this, and I decided to focus on the things I wish I had known when I started my career in-house.
Okay.
And those things that nobody told me, that feeling, you know? And my first lesson is, I think it's true what the cliche says, that first impressions stick, and the importance of having a good first impression. And what do you do with that? What I mean by that is you need to prepare for things. And for example, if you have a new role, one thing that has really helped me is this book, The First 90 Days, that helps you structure how do you come in to a new role. Even if it's in the same company and you're changing role, what do you do in that beginning? You know, learning the business, but also which stakeholders to meet, having quick wins in the beginning to establish your credibility, be extremely available in the beginning and creating those relationships, because then that credit comes back. And it's very hard, and I have seen this happening, if you start in the wrong way, it's very hard to reverse.
Right.
And that also applies, I would say, I like to share these things with my team. If I have a public presentation, you know, in the beginning, I would really rehearse like 15 times before, and think about any questions that would be asked to me. And now I can do without doing that or reducing the amount. But it was a boss of mine that told me once, like, and he was an executive president of a business unit. And he told me, like, oh, I've been rehearsing all day yesterday. And I was like, wow, I thought you spoke so naturally. I didn't think you were rehearsing. Yeah. You know, and then you realize how much preparation goes into things, or in a meeting, an important meeting that the CEO has, thinking about the talking points, the messages, how to answer to certain questions. There's a lot more preparation, I think, at least where I've worked, than I realized. And that ensures good performance, or increases your chances of good performance. So I think my lesson is that's the dirty little secret, that, you know, first impressions really count. So if you have an opportunity, to example, to present to the leadership team or to the board, put the time on it. Think how you want to show up. Think about the questions that people were going to ask. Because that can go a long way in your building your reputation.
Yeah. How do you... I guess the same goes going into any new role, regardless of the levels of stakeholders. But how do you coach your team around that? Like, do you have is there a playbook in terms of onboarding, or like how do you go about?
I think we try to do sessions. We have a program called Thrive within booking within the legal department. So we try to do sessions around this, where we focus on different topics that people can discuss, you know, how to have difficult conversations, management of stakeholders, management of workload. So we've been expanding and getting different topics. So that's one, is really, in the end, is telling stories and talking to people. But what I do myself and encourage others to do is to ask afterwards, how did the meeting go? How did I show up in this meeting? Do you think that my message stuck? Did I come too strong? I really think it's very important to seek feedback and create the environment that people give you feedback. So, and feedback is like fish. You cannot wait more than 3 days, you know? So, and so what I do with my team is, really, after a meeting, we usually talk to each other about how it went, what we could have done better, you know, and try not to do it in a heavy way, of course, and not in every single meeting. But if we had an important meeting, let's reflect, let's see how we can do better, and ask for feedback. And I try to be very open about what are the things that I am working on. For example, speaking less in a meeting, be the last one to give an opinion. And I ask how I'm doing on that. You know, am I improving? And by telling what you're working on, I think people also feel more comfortable in sharing feedback. And I do think that it's so important for learning to reflect on yourself and get that feedback loop. There's a book I recently read, Ultra Learning, that speaks about how feedback is so important. Immediate feedback is so important for you to get better. And of course, nobody's scoring how you did in a meeting, but you can tell by the results, by what people tell you, you know, and it's important to take the time, because that's how you improve.
Yeah, excellent. It's like going back to the point on preparation, it's something that I've worked on with a coach, because I am there's certain things that I just find sticky to sit down and just do it. Like preparing for like public speaking has never been my something that I felt entirely comfortable doing. But when I prepare, I come off knowing if I've done well, I don't need anyone to tell me I've done well. I'm like I think
Yeah.
I've done myself justice. But there's been a few occasions where I felt that hasn't been the case. It's always been down to preparation, and I've got a sticking point. I don't know what it is. Like sitting down, taking that time to prepare, and almost looking, like you said about not seeing what someone's doing in the background, and you just
Yeah.
think, oh, they're just natural. They can just stand up and talk, and it just
Yeah.
comes naturally. It's I don't know. I don't know if anyone has that ability, but yeah,
I think
super
knowing
interesting.
your audience as well. I
Yeah.
try to ask about the audience and then what are you worried about, right?
Mhm.
So at Booking, we have a lot of engineers. I was talking today to someone about this, how engineers think differently, you know? So one of the concerns sometimes is, I'm going to go up and start talking about legal things that nobody will be interested in, will find boring. How can you actually communicate in a way that is more impactful for that group?
Yeah.
And then have some people internally that you can consult with and ask for advice. But I remember one example I had was I used to be the business partner for the international team at AB InBev in the distribution agreements around the world and the license agreements. And if I wanted to do a legal training on contracts, nobody would come, you know, or they would come like not excited. But then if I market it as strategy on negotiations and war stories of contract negotiations, then people are very interested,
Yeah.
you know, all of a sudden. So I think it's important to think, why are you really worried? Is it because you were worried that you're going to bore people? What can you do about it? So it's kind of peel the onion and try to attack that in the root. That's what has worked for me, at least.
Yeah. Good advice. And you mentioned Ultra Learning, the book that you've recently read. I'd seen your post on LinkedIn recently about that. And when we were talking again before coming on and recording, just around, like I see your posts on LinkedIn, think they're like authentic and give a really good impression as to what you're like as an individual and as a leader. Like, what, I guess, is that something that's do you have a strategy around that, or is it something? I guess, is there a purpose to that?
No. I will be very honest. It was a little bit by accident, to be honest, that I started, posting, and initially was thinking about building my team and telling a bit more about Booking.
Yeah.
But over time, I don't have a strategy. When I have an idea, it usually is when I'm biking around Amsterdam.
Okay.
I have an idea, I draft it, I wait a few hours, and then I post it, because it's good to wait a few hours, because then it's good that you read it after you.
Yeah.
But my strategy there is just share whenever I think I have something to share. And when I say it happened by accident, I had this one post that was about my story of miscarriage.
Yeah.
And talking, because I was very, very touched that Booking was giving parental leave for long periods and for both genders, for different family situations, and also in case you had a miscarriage, you had 4 weeks. And I remember that when I had a miscarriage, I had just 1 day, or at least I took only 1 day. I just gave myself the right for 1 day.
Yeah.
Which dealt with the physical elements, but not the psychological ones. And I did a post, and it was almost 500,000 impressions. So that's what I mean by accident, because then I had more followers. Not that I have many, but that's what happened. So I'm still exploring what I could do with this. But more than anything is just, I don't think there are a lot of people that speak about being in-house. And I like the sense of community. And I have met people through LinkedIn that I wouldn't have met otherwise. And that, so I think it also helps diversifying my network.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we get into our own bubbles of where you've studied, where you've worked.
Absolutely.
And I like that it allows you to go broader. So that's something that also drives me now to do this.
Yeah. It's back to what we said about what I said earlier about where I think it is really powerful is that network effect, and your daily conversations, your daily experiences. You may communicate that one-to-one, but it's helpful advice to one-to-many and projecting it and going, if it can help one person that's in your network, then it has a great impact. I also think it's a really useful tool from a talent acquisition perspective. It is something that I think helps businesses and legal teams stand
I didn't
out.
realize actually that, but I realized by doing it that I started getting these type of comments, and I was like, oh wow, I hadn't thought about this.
Maybe I should have a strategy.
Yes.
Yeah. Excellent. And so we'll move on to lesson 2.
So my lesson 2 is focus on impact when you're in-house, and maybe that applies for other professions as well, of course, but I tell my team usually, giving the legal advice is half the job. The other half, I would say, there's 2 main things. One is influence people to follow your advice, and that there's the importance of communication, strategy, mapping stakeholders, and all that stuff. And the other thing is how to operationalize legal advice. And that, for me, is something that I and my team are still working on. How do you make it in a way that if you're not there, your advice is already so embedded in the processes of the company that it will happen in the way that you intended it to happen.
Okay.
So to give you an example, just to illustrate, if you have a related party transactions, these companies are related to the company through the board members, etc. So when you're looking at a contract that is with a related party, you have a different standard of review. Have that in the procurement system so that whenever those vendors show up, that contract gets flagged and someone in legal takes a look.
Okay.
So doing that next step of thinking, what are the things that I can embed in the system with a control that helps? It doesn't apply to everything, but I think there are many things that you can put processes around and have that operational mindset, which is not something that I feel like we learn in law school or in law firms, but it's extremely important because I think training is important, but I don't believe that training, science tells you that people don't remember. Yeah. They remember 3% of what you say. And I see many times legal departments talking, oh, we did training. Yes, but I think that gets you just as far as you know.
Yeah. And I guess like booking as a disruptive business, it's an entrepreneurial business. The majority of the rest of the company will be encouraged to disrupt, to think outside the box. So there's no set way to do legal that's supporting that type of business. So you need entrepreneurial lawyers to think, right, how can we make it?
Yeah, no, we have a mix, and that's why when we hired, I should have mentioned that, we also hired a combination of people from startups and people from big companies as well, because also booking is becoming more regulated. So we need more processes and people that have seen what good looks like, and then is helping us implement. So I'm happy that we have a good mix. But you're absolutely right. I mean, we are always discussing different operating models, and recently on Gen AI, we had a lot of work going on, and it touches so many different areas of law, IP, contracts, and we created a pod. We call it the AI pod, with a group of lawyers that were cross-functional, that together they, is a self-contained team that would focus on the priorities that it had and would run with the business with it, instead of, working through your organizational structure. So, it's been we've been testing different things, but that's what I mean. To focus on impact, to focus on the results, and then thinking, one, how you influence on this, how do you facilitate good conversations, good decisions, good meetings, and the second piece being how do you make it operational where you can make it operational. So those are skills that we don't learn in law school. And again, nobody told me, I think. Maybe influence I could have guessed, but the operational piece, it was new.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's good to think of your feet. Who has, like, for you, when you're looking at your peers, what's the gold standard of in-house legal team? Is there do you hold someone within your network or your peers or a business that has, or even historically, what's a gold standard legal function?
I find it hard to answer that question, and I also don't want to offend anybody by not including.
We'll edit that.
So I think different teams do different things, you know, and for what I can see. But I also think that you can learn from anyone. You know, I remember at AB InBev, because it was very cost conscious. At ACC once we had a session on how for small legal departments. I went to that session and I came out with tons of ideas of how to control costs by going to the small legal department. So I think it's really try to find out who is doing well. I would say in terms of the thing of writing around this, because there's not that many books from in-house lawyers. A book that has really shaped my thinking is Brad Smith, General Counsel of Microsoft, in a book called Tools and Weapons.
Okay.
And he speaks about his lesson of being Microsoft for 10 years, litigating with the European Commission and elsewhere, and how they changed their approach and collaboration with governments and the thinking behind. Of course, it's something public. I imagine there's a lot of things that are not written in that book that have happened. Yeah. But I find there's some very good ideas about how to think proactively on self-regulation, on some of the stuff that I mentioned before, how to make integrity operationalized. And that's, for me, is something. So I imagine that Microsoft has a very good legal department.
Yeah. I would expect so. So you're now currently in Amsterdam, but your career is an international legal career, citizen of the world. What's been, I think for lawyers, that is often, it's not always a profession that travels internationally, or there's I think an assumption, or people put themselves in a box, that it doesn't travel from jurisdiction. How did that come about? So your background, you qualified in Brazil, or you first
Yes, I did,
Brazil?
and I was. You're absolutely right. I was sad when I went to law school, that I felt like, because I always liked international environments.
Yeah.
And my parents had lived abroad many years. I was born in London, but then I went to Brazil when I was 5 years old. My parents had lived in France and England and had friends all over. So I always had this, like, I really want to do that. So when I went to law school, I said, okay, but now I'm probably going to be the rest of my life in Brazil because I'm a Brazilian lawyer. But then I had the luck of having a boss who told me about the LLM program in the United States, that you do a master's in law. And that with that, you can take the New York bar. You can work in a New York law firm or a different state, of course. Yeah. And start a career. And that's what I decided to do. And once I was in a New York law firm, I also found out that I could transfer and do some additional tests and become a UK solicitor. So I did that. Okay. So many ways to find your way. But I don't think everybody needs to do that. One thing that I feel like it's a recommendation I have is, I think it's important to have some experience and knowledge of a civil law system and a common law system, because I think our two ways of thinking that, it's not completely different, but there are some differences, and I think it helps to know. So I joke that my Brazilian background helps me a lot in continental Europe, because Brazil is very much was influenced by Italian and France and Germany in its legal system. So that's a tip I have for students when they're asking me. And I also like people from Canada, for example, because in their law schools, they usually have common law and civil law. So because of the way Canada is set up, So that's one of the tips I have if you want an international career, to try to understand how people think in different jurisdictions. But once you're in-house, you have to be good in, more than anything else, in asking good questions. Yeah. It's not just answering the questions like you are in a law firm. It's spotting the issues and asking the right questions to spot the issues. Yeah. And to spot the opportunity as well. So, yeah.
And the first move you made, so to come to Europe, was you were in-house at AB InBev. Yeah. And moved to.
Yeah, I was in New York first as a legal director of M&A, and then I moved to Mexico, where I worked on the integration of Grupo Modelo, the company that owns the Corona beer.
Oh, yeah, nice.
And then I went to Belgium, first for a global role on procurement and the IT department. It was a mix of different things and the international team. And then I became general counsel of Europe and Middle East. So I was there for 8 years, and I had 4 different roles in 3 different countries. So
Great.
I consider myself very lucky, but I was willing to move as well.
Yes.
You know, and that's not everybody is willing to move. And I have a very supportive, at the time, boyfriend, then became husband.
Yeah.
That was always supporting me in these moves. So we had for 5 years, we were not living in the same place, but not 5 years. It was not consecutive, but we had a total of 5 years where we were not living in the same place. So it was hard, it was personal sacrifice.
Yeah.
But it also allowed us to live in different places, get to know different places, and visit each other also in different places. So
yeah, nice. What's the hardest part for you of like up sticks relocating, like having moved from Belgium to Netherlands? Even it's.
I think my biggest lesson is. There's a poem by a Portuguese writer that speaks about being eternal while it lasts. And he's talking about relationships, you know, that you have to face a relationship as if it's going to last forever, even if it doesn't, because if you come with a different mindset, it doesn't work. I think I have had challenges with that, of coming to a place thinking I'm not going to stay here for too long. So, limiting how much I integrated in a way, you know, focusing too much in a way on work and getting to know the country and traveling and less on connections because you never know for how long you're going to be there. So over time I learned, no, I have to arrive on every place as if I was going to stay there forever.
Yeah.
And that changes the experience. So I think it was a bit of a defense mechanism, because when I was in New York, I felt like I was 8 years in New York, 7 years in New York. And New York is a place that people are coming and going, right? And for 1-2 years. So it felt a bit, after 7 years, I felt like sad that every year my friends were leaving, you know? So it becomes a bit of a defense mechanism. But I learned that's not the right way to go. You have to go full in and hopefully learn the language if you don't know the language. Having said that, I have not learned Dutch, so I'm not following my own advice. But the other places I lived, I spoke the language or learned the language.
Yeah, try. It's just about trying, isn't it? And steps, little steps. But with young kids, it's a challenge. Where's like, is there anywhere? I'll bat back to you on the Portuguese poem, but there's a Scottish song, Caledonia, and it's. Caledonia's calling me, so it's about going back to Scotland, always feeling that your roots are in Scotland, although you'll travel and go here, there, and everywhere. Is there anywhere that like feels that's where I'll head and put down roots later in life?
I think I struggle with the question, where are you from? I usually say, that my heart is Brazilian. So culturally, I am Brazilian through and through.
Right.
Lived in Mexico, Belgium, England, Netherlands, Belgium, and in the United States, but I feel Brazilian. I feel a special connection with London because my parents lived many years there, so I also came back a lot. So that's a place, I wouldn't call it home, but it's a special connection. But I think I will say something cheesy, but my home is where my family is.
Yeah.
So it's where my husband, my 2 kids, my dog.
Nice.
So I feel a bit like a nomad in that sense, although trying to integrate everywhere I go.
Yeah.
But that's where my home, and it's it's the immigrant issue. Everywhere and nowhere is home, and the world feels very much like that for me. But culturally, I am Brazilian.
Yeah. Nice. And you're in the right place at booking a travel business for
that was
for that.
Part of the plan. That was part of what attracted me.
Yeah, nice. So move to lesson 3.
So lesson 3, again, in this of thinking about the things that were not obvious to me when I went in-house, my lesson is to always think how you're going to contribute as a department to the strategy of the company. And let me unpack that a little bit. First, I think we have as a legal department and as a legal community, as in-house lawyers, I think we have a lot of opportunity. First, because we see a lot. We have the bird's eye view of the business. We are involved in pretty much everything. And also, the second thing is that what people call it the outside-in perspective. Because we are, especially in the public affairs side, we are out there speaking to regulators, to partners, to, in our case, hotel associations. We get to know a lot what others think of us. And unfortunately, our view is not always the view that others have on us, right? Yeah. And understanding how your stakeholders are seeing certain practices, the issues that they have, and then bringing that into the company and being a little bit of that challenging voice, not a little bit, a lot, this challenging voice to internalize that stakeholder perspective. And doesn't mean we're going to do everything that stakeholders want, but take that into account. I think it really helps creating a company that is more customer-centric, more partner-centric, and that's anticipating issues. So I think that legal and public affairs, I really believe that we are very well positioned to take that role. And then what does it mean to take that role, right? The way I see it is getting the department being seen beyond risk management. I think there's always a risk of talk to legal, so what's the risk? Yeah. And I try to avoid that conversation, and not avoid completely. I mean, we can talk about risk, but avoid that framing, better said, So I joke with my team sometimes, can we talk about law without using the words law, regulation, or compliance? And to give you an example, if the company, and we speak a lot about being more customer-centric, why don't we speak more internally and externally about earning trust of the customer, of being transparent, or giving choice? All of these things in the end are in consumer law, in privacy law, but you don't need to use that framing. And I think that makes the legal department more strategic and more approachable and more connected to the business. That's one. And so one of the things we've done to improve that, every year in July we have the board meets to discuss the strategy of the company long term. Okay. Before that, the leadership team meets. So what we do is we create, as a department, with my direct reports, a memo that talks about the things that we believe should be taken into account in terms of the external environment. Okay. What are the big issues happening? What do we see as trends? And then we recap if what we said the previous year happened or didn't happen, and our analysis and insights from the past, and what we see coming forward, and what do we think that means for the strategy of the company. And that has helped building a muscle of thinking more about the external environment, but also forcing us to articulate that in a way that is compelling. So that's one of the things. The other thing, as thinking about what you can contribute to the company, I do think that lawyers are good in thinking long term. We are always thinking about what makes it sustainable, what's good in the long term interest of your stakeholders, and I think it's important to bring that view. And there, of course, the how you communicate that is very important. But I also speak with my team. There are moments that we need to find space to say, okay, what's the vision for the legal department in the next 3-4 years? What do we want to be? Or where do we want to go? And also bring those discussions to the management teams that they are part of. Okay. And help with that long-term thinking. And always, from an efficiency standpoint, also thinking 10% of your time should be spent on making your future self doing the job easier. I joke that 10% of my time has to be for future Maria to have an easier job. And so there's this journey of self-improvement as well that is thinking on the long term, because otherwise you're going to not be very happy 1 year in if you have moved enough. And then in terms of what I'm very passionate about on all of this, I mentioned the memos and the discussions, is how can we see regulation and the external environment as part of the business strategy, as a part of a reality, and not just as a risk to be mitigated or addressed, And I think that legal teams can be very important to educate the board, the CEO on these topics, and make it real, make it concrete, and help the company navigate the complexity, because the complexity is real. Regulations are increasing. You have regulations that conflict with each other within a country and between countries. And I don't need to tell you about, or anyone, about all the geopolitical issues that we are having, right? So helping a company navigate through that, I think, again, we are very well placed. So that's something that I didn't realize when I come in, how important was for the role. And just to make it also more concrete, the way I look at this is when I do my own review or review my direct reports, I tell my direct reports from the start, it's not that I tell that in the review, that they have 3 jobs. One is to be the leader, not one job. One is to be the leader of their area, so whatever it is, privacy, employment, law, corporate. The other one is to be a leader of the department, of the Legal and Public Affairs Department. And the other one is to be a leader of the company. What are you doing that you're contributing to the strategy and the results of the company? And then we talk in those 3 different layers. And I find that helpful, and also for my own role, what I'm doing beyond leading the Legal and Public Affairs Department as a member of the management board of the company. What values am I adding there? And I think that's a very important mindset. And I would say it's not just for people that have the leadership role. I think people that are still in mid-career, act as a leader. Be a leader in your space, and also contribute to the company as a whole. And if you start acting like one, that gets noticed, and that's also like a career tip that I would have. Yeah,
that's great. Those are great tips. It sounds like a great function that you're building and developing. And I think going back to your piece on sounds like looking around corners to see what the upcoming risks are, and but that's where it's so important that the policy team. The public affairs team sits there, that you've got that dialogue and you're close to it.
And talk to other legal departments as well. And you need to be careful not to stay only internally focused, right? And spend time talking to others. Yeah,
awesome. Well, thank you for sharing those 3. If people wanted to get involved in the ACC, how do they do that? What's the best way to?
You can register and become a member as an individual. You can. If you're general counsel, you can decide whether you want to register your whole team, you as a corporate. Or if you are not sure if you want to be a member yet or not, it's also possible to register to the conference and attend the conference as a non-member.
Okay.
There's a different pricing, but the difference is not too big. There is a difference, but it's also a good way of testing the water.
Test the water, dip the toe. Awesome. Well, we'll share links to how to register for that, and
thank you very much.
Further information. But all the best with it.
Thank you.
Next month or 2. And thank you so much for sharing your lessons. I've really enjoyed the chat.
Thanks.
Hey, thanks for listening to today's show, and I really hope you got some value from it. It's the real reason that I set up the podcast, to help you, our audience of in-house lawyers, or people within the legal profession who are looking to move in-house, to learn from others in the industry. This podcast was brought to you by Harriet Brown In-House Legal Recruitment, which is the business I'm the founder of. And we're a legal recruitment business that is driven by the mission to help lawyers find fulfillment in their legal careers. And this extends well beyond the transactional aspects of finding you new jobs or finding hires for your team. We excel in bringing the best people together and the right people together, which is why community has always been at the heart of our business, to add real value to our network. So to find more about that and what we're doing, keep up to date with our community, and also to find out about our services, get in touch by connecting on LinkedIn or visiting our website, harrietbrown.com.